What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and today I'm finally getting around to taking a closer look at the pilot/tanker weapons in Battlefield 1. As always, the focus of the video will be on the least used gun in the class, and I will be comparing and contrasting its stats to those of the competition to find out if it really deserves to be at the bottom of the pick list. Let's start out by taking a look at the usage time percentages from battlefieldtracker.com, and as at the 25th of July 2017, the most used pilot/tanker weapon is the sawed-off shotgun with 39.5%. This is followed by the Stop Auto with 28.7% and the C96 carbine with 18.7%. The remaining four weapons are used far less on average, with the Piper M1893 coming in with a usage time share of 6%, the P08 Artillery with 3.5%, the M1911 Extended with 3%, and in distant last place the Model 1903 Extended with 0.6% of the total usage time. So there we have quite a clear picture. The Model 1903 Extended has completely failed to gain any significant popularity since its introduction in March, but does that mean that the gun is useless? Well, maybe or maybe not, and the best way to figure this out is with a comprehensive stat analysis and some good old-fashioned field testing. A lot of the pilot/tanker personal defense weapons are carbine versions of pistols that are also featured in the game, and even though the added muzzle velocity that this will give to the ammunition should also translate into slightly more energy and therefore damage, the in-game stats for these weapons remain exactly the same. The only exception here is the Stop Auto, which is slightly weaker than the semi-auto version used by the Scout class, and instead has the exact same damage characteristics as the Automatico. The sawed-off shotgun has the same theoretical damage potential as the Model 10A, 168 points in total when up close, but its larger pellet spread means that landing all of your pellets on target becomes impossible at relatively close ranges. The 1903 Extended's max damage of 30 points is on par with the P08 and slightly below average overall, while its minimum damage of 13.5 makes it seem a little underpowered at range. The damage drop-off chart shows that the only weapon to be consistently weaker is the Stop Auto, while most other weapons are clustered around a similar curve in the middle, and the Piper standing head and shoulders above all of them. The apparent weakness in power exhibited by the 1903 is counterbalanced by the gun's fire rate of 359, which is the second highest, only beaten by the Stop Auto's 900 rounds per minute. Most other guns come in at 299 rounds per minute, with the exception of the most powerful single projectile weapon in the group, the Piper M1893. In terms of bullet capacity, the 1903 is once again significantly below average with its 11 shots, only beating the Piper and the double-barreled shotgun of course, but that's a totally different weapon and not really comparable. The damage drop-off stats with the fire rate allows us to calculate the theoretical time to kill for each gun, which I have collated into an exquisite heat map for you. As you can see, the 1903 Extended is pretty mediocre at all ranges. The Frommer is very good up close, and at least in theory, it is outstanding at greater ranges, but since these stats depend on being able to land every shot on the torso of your enemy at max fire rate, the times become less and less realistic as we progress down the table. The P08 Artillery and the C96 carbine have exactly the same time to kill stats at all ranges, and they're pretty bad up to 16 meters and no more than mediocre beyond that. Very similar to the standard 1911, the extended version is competitive up to 10 meters distance, but then immediately becomes much less impressive once you try to reach out any further. The Piper is almost the opposite of this, with its slow fire rate making the gun relatively slow to kill up to 10 meters, but with its increased damage per shot making it more effective for medium-range engagements. And finally, the sawed-off double-barreled shotgun is probably the most polarized gun in this group. In theory, its minimum damage per shot is 84 points, but the spread of the pellets makes this impossible to achieve, and so the data you see here is based on field experiments I conducted to give us a more realistic picture. Up to 13 meters, the weapon can kill in a single shot, but beyond 16 meters you're almost certain to need more than 2 shots, which means going through the gun's reload cycle, and this significantly drags down the time to kill. So the gun is devastating up to 16 meters, but will leave you virtually defenseless in more open areas. All the power in the world is useless unless you can also hit your targets, so let's now examine some of the stats that play into that. First up is the muzzle velocity, and since the 1903 Extended and the 1911 Extended are basically the same as their pistol counterparts, but with extended magazines and attached stocks, their muzzle velocities are unchanged. The From a Stop Auto, P08 Artillery and C96 Carbine all have slightly lengthened barrels, giving them a 20 to 30 meters per second muzzle velocity boost compared to their pistol versions. And with that, most of these guns end up clustered around the average muzzle velocity for the class, apart from the 1911 Extended, which falls far below the average, and the C96 Carbine and Piper, which significantly exceed the average. The next factor to consider when discussing the gun's capabilities of hitting their targets is their spread, both when aiming down sights and hip firing. ADS spread is pretty much the same for most of the guns, including the 1903 Extended, with 0.36 degrees when standing still and 0.44 degrees while moving. The remaining weapons are slightly more accurate when standing still, but slightly worse when moving, with the Piper being the most accurate of the group and therefore also the most capable at medium ranges. That is, as long as you're not firing while moving. Interestingly, the sawed-off shotgun is perfectly accurate when aiming down sights and standing still, and also has below average spread when moving. Hipfire spread is significantly greater, and for most guns, once again including our plucky little 1903 Extended, it is 1.167 degrees while standing still and 1.667 degrees while moving. The only exceptions here are what I would call the hipfire specialists. The From a Stop Auto has slightly better hip-fire spread with 0.8 and 1.2 degrees, and head and shoulders above all of them is the sawed-off shotgun with 0.3 and 0.5 degrees. A final factor to consider here is the recoil for each weapon, and in this category, the 1903 Extended is the top dog, at least compared to the other single-shot weapons, with 1 degree vertical and 0.15 degrees horizontal. The Frommer does have a significantly smaller vertical recoil compared to most of the other guns, but also a relatively stiff horizontal recoil, and its exceptional fire rate means that overall it is quite challenging to control when targeting an enemy anywhere beyond very close range. The worst recoil by far is experienced by the sawn-off shotgun, and interestingly, this is the first gun where I have seen horizontal recoil that is more pronounced in one direction over the other. So yeah, true fact, the sawed-off shotgun will pull slightly more to the right than it does to the left. Reload times are again very similar for most of the guns, and the 1903 Extended comes in just below average in this category. The only standouts here are the Piper, which is very slow with 4 seconds for the tactical and empty reload, and the C96, which can be reloaded from empty with 2 stripper clips, taking 4.084 seconds, while tactical reloads can take anywhere from 1.95 seconds for a single round up to a maximum of 7.317 seconds for 19 rounds. And that's just about it. I can also give you a quick look at the deploy times, but since we're dealing with primary weapons here, the deploy time is not really as important as it would be for secondaries. So let me summarize what we've learned about the 1903 Extended. Low recoil is definitely one of the gun's standout strengths, and especially the very low horizontal recoil. Damage per shot is slightly below average, but very good fire rate makes up for this to an extent, resulting in a theoretical time to kill that is okay but not great at just about any range. The reload speed, both tactical and from empty, is just a touch better than average, but only because the Piper and the C96 drag that average down considerably. ADS and hipfire spreads could not be any more middle of the road, and the same goes for the muzzle velocity, which is just a fraction below average. A relatively small ammo capacity of 11 shots, which is only 3 more than the standard 1903, is a definite weakness, especially when compared to something like the P08 artillery's 33 shot capacity. And I think all of this gives us a pretty good indication as to why nobody has really bothered to adopt the 1903 Extended since its relatively recent introduction. It's just about the most mediocre gun that I've so far come across in Battlefield 1, and there is really nothing about it that compensates for the significantly below average capacity. Does this mean that it deserves the minimal usage it gets? No. During my time testing the gun, I experienced pretty much what the stats have already told us. The 1903 is an okay personal defense weapon. Not terrible, but also not great, and as with most tanker/pilot weapons, the best thing to do is to try to stay alive cautiously until the opportunity to pick up someone else's kit presents itself. The standout weapons for me in this category are the ones that already see the most use. The sawed-off shotgun and the from a stop auto are actually pretty useful at very close ranges, even though they do leave you vulnerable when caught out in open areas, but at least they are good at something. The Piper 1893 has the best single-shot damage and in my opinion is the most capable tanker/pilot weapon at medium ranges. And if I had to choose any of the remaining 4 weapons, I would always go with the P08 artillery. Its excellent ammo capacity can make all the difference in a hairy situation, and based on personal experience, I would say that this gun could also be put into the category of not being completely useless. All other guns are much of the same, better than not having a main weapon at all, but not by very much. They lack the capability of effectively reaching out to medium ranges, and compared to the Frommer and Sword-Off, they are really bad up close too. And now, before I sign off, let's just take a moment to examine the kill efficiency ratios for each of these guns, like we did in my last video, since when you're trying to evaluate the usefulness of a bunch of weapons, there is nothing like looking at the actual in-game performance. As you might remember, the efficiency ratio is calculated by dividing the battlefieldtracker.com kill percentage by the time percentage for each gun, and a result of larger than 1 means that the gun is above average at getting kills, while a score below 1 means below average performance compared to the rest of the group. Unsurprisingly, the shotgun gets most kills per time unit, followed by the from a stop auto, and the standard set by these 2 weapons means that every other gun's performance is below average by comparison. The P08 artillery comes in at 3rd place, closely followed by the 1903 Extended and the M1911 Extended, and then the C96 carbine, and last of all, the Piper M1893. I have to say I'm a little surprised by the 1911's performance, since whenever I've used it I've not had a good time with it at all, and I'm also surprised to see that the Piper is in last place. My guess would have been to see the Piper ranked somewhere up higher, but there you go. So to wrap up, the 1903 Extended is a thoroughly mediocre gun in a class of weapons that is purposefully designed to underperform when going up against regular infantry classes, and the stats, as well as my field testing and the kill efficiency ratio, all confirm this. The gun is definitely not a hidden gem, but it does deserve to be used a little more. And to all of you who have not managed to switch away from the C96 yet, I know that the vehicle spawning system is not great and forces you to make a rushed choice, but please do consider taking the time to switch over to a more decent gun in one of your next games. The C96 definitely does not deserve to be the 3rd most picked gun in this class. And with that, I think I've covered the tanker/pilot weapons from just about every angle imaginable. As always, feel free to comment below which one of these weapons do you like the most, which one the least, and why haven't you given the poor little 1903 Extended a chance yet? I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.